everybody, it's Jason Blaha with Ice Cream Fitness here. Once again, it is time for the Gear Talk with Jason Q&A. I didn't do one of these last week because I simply didn't have enough good questions, but I have enough this week, so let's get into it. But hold on, let me give you guys a bicep shot first. Alright, and let's get right into these questions. I have a macroprolactinoma, an overgrowth of prolactin-producing cells, tumor, that has not responded to meds for quite some time and will be surgically removed for the second time pretty soon, and then followed with radiation. Is it possible that switching from standard TRT regimen to a non-aromatizing AAS such as Masteron could possibly influence my treatment? I think, in all honesty, given this particular problem you have, and obviously since this person is off of GH15 and they're obviously a steroid user and on TRT, I would say, given the specifics of what you have, Masteron would actually be the best compound you could possibly use for your TRT, because it's still going to give you the sex drive and other things that you need from the testosterone to some extent, but this drug was actually developed specifically to treat breast cancer and tumors in the breast in women, even though it's an anabolic. And it actually acts as a mild anti-estrogen and anti-progestin. So if you're on this compound, just keep in mind that you're not going to have any estrogen or progesterone in your system if you're not on anything else but it, which can lead to some problems. So eventually you might want to consider, if you're going to do this for any length of time, I would consider adding a SARMS like Nolvadex, also known as tamoxifen, simply to get some estrogenic activity in some of your tissue, even though it's an anti-estrogen in breast tissue, because you're going to have problems with HDL cholesterol, you're going to have problems with bone mineralization and other things due to your estrogen levels being at nearly zero. But all of this could possibly help with future growth of these tumors if you have this as a reoccurring problem. Although you're free to run it by your doctor also. Okay, next question. Can you cut on Test and Deca, and can Deca and Tren be used together? Yeah, you can absolutely cut on Test and Deca. In fact, I know guys who use that as their contest prep, even though it's very rare. And you have to remember, wet compounds do not bloat you the same way when you're in a caloric deficit as when you're in a surplus. And a lot of it's caused by your sodium intake and other things. Now, obviously, guys who are blasting things like Test and Deca when they're bulking, they bloat up like balloons. And people think that they gained 4 or 5% body fat when they actually didn't. It's water. But when you're cutting, they can make you look slightly fatter, but they can also make you look a lot fuller. And they're still helpful on a cut, and you can drop the wet compounds out when you need to look really ripped if you want, depending on how your body responds to different things, and change them for something else. But they're perfectly acceptable on a cut, and they will help preserve muscle mass and help burn body fat off, even though they bloat you a bit. And the thing to remember with Deca is, and any nandrolone, is that I find that your sodium intake plays the biggest role in how much water you retain when you're on it, in addition to the fact of aromatase inhibitors, because even though nandrolone itself is completely immune to the aromatase enzyme, it converts into androstenedione at a reasonably high rate, which is more affected by the aromatase enzyme than testosterone is, in addition to the fact that it seems to elevate aldosterone levels in the body, which makes you very, very sensitive to sodium intake. Now, as far as Deca and Tren together, or nandrolone and Tren, I know a lot of guys who lean bulk on NPP and Tren, or even use it in their contest prep. And the concern is that they can both cross-bind to progestin receptors, but the thing is, it's still an issue of total intake of drugs involved there. I mean, meaning if you're running 400 milligrams of each, don't expect it to have more progesteronic activity than if you ran 800 of just the Deca. It's just because you're combining different compounds that can have overlap in side effects, it's still about total dose as far as some of that goes. So yeah, they can be used together just fine, and I know guys who do so. This is an issue of, if you're particularly sensitive to progestin or prolactin side, you're going to want appropriate ancillaries to combat that. Or you may not be able to use them at all, depending on how severe the sides are for you. But on a stack like that, I would definitely have Cabergon on hand. Alright, next question. Deca and Equipoise stacked together make any sense for bodybuilding purposes? Yeah, I don't really see an issue here. There can be a synergy. This used to be because people used to talk so much about type 1 and type 2 steroids, and the thing is, Nandrolone is probably right behind Tren, it's right up there with Tren actually in terms of androgen receptor binding in the muscle tissue, but Nandrolone doesn't really carry anabolic effects, secondary anabolic effects that are non-androgen receptor mediated. So it's one reason when you stack it with test you get so much better gains but than you would on just test alone, because test actually doesn't bind to the muscle tissue androgen receptor quite as well as Nandrolone does, but it has non-androgen receptor mediated activity and produces some other hormones at a higher rate. So Nandrolone is kind of a pure androgen in that sense as far as its anabolic effect. It's more of a pure anabolic in that it doesn't have a lot of positive benefits for muscle building outside of its direct androgen binding, but it's very good at it. While Equipoise or Bolidon does have some secondary benefits that are not directly related to its androgen receptor mediated activity, so they're perfectly fine together. If that's what you want to do, there's no reason you can't run a stack like that to make gains, even though a lot of people would tell you it's redundant to run two different milder anabolics together. I don't agree, because what they can also do is that people who get high Deca side effects can run lower Deca, and they can add some extra Equipoise in, because Equipoise is nearly side effect free for most people, just to get some extra anabolic activity on top of that without contributing to more side effects that they don't want to deal with. Alright, next question. What is your opinion on some of the new research chemicals that are spilling out of underground labs? E.g. Inobo, SARM, ostarine, and other selective androgen receptor modulators. Do you think that they will be successful or more so than SARMs? And do you think of them being used by themselves or with more traditional anabolics? I can tell you straight up, using them by themselves, no matter what happens, is not going to work, because you're not getting all the benefits that you'd be getting from something like, say, testosterone purely from a SARM. So I see them as, if they prove to be successful, they're going to be something that you use as part of a stack. They're not going to replace testosterone. You're still going to probably be injecting testosterone and using other anabolics with them, but they may take up a large portion of the stack purely for their androgen receptor activity. And as far as the people using them, some people are reporting good gains, and I've heard some people reporting no gains at all or really bad gains. So they seem to be really hit or miss right now. And it's going to be a matter of time of just seeing how they work out in terms of how effective they're going to be. But yeah, eventually I could see them as being very much a huge part of a stack for people who want to high dose and they don't really want side effects, because you can run a very mild stack with other non-androgen receptor mediated anabolic benefits, and then stack in a bunch of SARMs in there to make sure that you completely saturate your androgen receptors for more gains. So I think that's the way they're going to go, depending on how effective they turn out to be or not. Alright, last question. What compounds do you recommend for lean gains without bloat? I mean, stay fucking shredded year-round, but still gain some muscle. I was thinking Tren plus low test plus Mastron. Can't take EQ because I am already hungry all the time. Now, when you say shredded year-round with this, I'm assuming you're talking about obviously blasting and cruising and staying on different things pretty much 12 months out of the year with a setup like this. My concern is when you mention Tren year-round, I can tell you right up front, very, very few people can handle Trenbolone year-round, and I wouldn't stay on it year-round anyways, just because of the harshness on your body and the inflammatory problems and things it can cause in the body over staying on it for months and months. So Tren is something you're only going to want to use sparingly. Obviously, low test is going to be a must if you're wanting to avoid bloat. And I would have to question, why do you say that on the EQ? Because not everyone gets the hunger, and a lot of experts think the hunger thing is a myth. And plenty of people don't have the hunger issues on it. So if you've not experienced this personally, for someone with your goals, because EQ is so mild, and it tends to give just lean, dry gains anyways, and you can run a lot of it with minimal to zero side effects, EQ would be pretty high on my recommendations. So I would actually recommend something like test plus EQ plus maybe cycling through milder DHT based compounds like Masteron or Anavar. And the only things you watch is that you kind of have to choose your poison with Masteron or Anavar. The only thing I would watch for with Masteron is, do you mind your hair falling out? Keep track of the acne it can cause, and then really pay attention to your prostate, because if you're on Masteron 6+ months or 12 months out of the year, even at a low dose, it does have quite a bit of androgen binding in the prostate when compared to other compounds, so it can be a problem there if you're prone to prostate issues. So if you go the other route with Anavar, the thing you've got to look at is the effect on your lipid profile, your liver enzymes, if you stay on it for prolonged periods of time. So you would want to get blood work done every couple of months, or every 3 months at least, if you're going to run a low dose of Anavar year round. So that would be the kind of recommendation I would make. Now, if you just simply cannot handle the EQ, I would consider maybe just upping the dose on the DHT based compounds, or I would consider adding in and testing it and see how you do on it, if you stay dry or not, because it depends on the person, of NPP, which is again a shorter ester nandrolone, but remember, you're going to have to inject it 3 times a week. So maybe something like low test plus NPP if you can't handle EQ, even though EQ might be my first choice there, and then stacking in a little Masteron or Anavar, or rotating between the two depending on which negative effects you're willing to deal with. And I think that would give you pretty much what you're looking for. And obviously your diet's going to have to stay on point. If you want to stay really, really lean year round, your diet is going to have to be perfect and on point. But these compounds will help with that, particularly stuff like the Masteron and Anavar added in, because they do have some mild lipogenic effects in the body. And then use Tren as you feel like using it, but I would not run Tren even anywhere near even half of the year. I would personally not recommend for most people using Tren more than about 10 to 12 weeks out of the year, but that's just me personally. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope this has been informative, and I will talk to you next time.